Sprawled between sun-kissed farmland and spectacular hills in Camarillo, California, sits the beautiful campus of California State University, Channel Islands, where we are reimagining higher education for a new generation and era. Our mission is rooted in the belief that higher education transforms lives and the advancement of knowledge enhances the common good. Cal State Channel Islands provides an exceptional higher education experience to students from Ventura, Santa Barbara, and the LA Basin. Many of our students come from underserved populations and are the first in their families to attend college. A majority receive financial assistance. Our faculty and staff are united in the belief that an educated populace serves as the fundamental bedrock of our democracy and the surest path to a brighter future for us all. Our students receive a hands-on education that instills in them the critical thinking, problem-solving, communication, and mathematical skills they will need to thrive in today's innovation economy. They are engaged citizens who are more likely to vote, volunteer, and participate in their communities and our democracy. Our graduates are the nurses, teachers, healthcare providers, and leaders critical to the success of our region, and every degree we confer is a return on the investment into the strength and vitality of our community.
Good morning, and welcome to From Change, Opportunity, a webinar series brought to you by the CSUCI Foundation that highlights CI's continued efforts to reimagine higher education for a new generation and era. My name is Neil Kreisel, and I'm a friend of the university and radio show host at AM 1290 KZSB. Interim President Richard Yao will join us shortly. Before we jump into our discussion, vision of the next chapter, I'd like to point out a few housekeeping items. Please be aware that we're recording today's event. This and all webinar recordings are listed on CSUCI's website. I'd also like to draw your attention to the bottom of your screen. If you wave your mouse near the bottom, you will notice a menu bar pop up containing a chat button. During the presentation, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A box. There may not be time to answer every question, but staff will capture the unanswered questions and follow up in the next few days. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Richard Yao, Interim President of CSU Channel Islands. Good morning, Dr. Yao, and welcome.
Morning, Neil. Thanks for having me.
So a few months ago, you were Vice President of Student Affairs, involved in almost every aspect of the school, well-liked, you loved your job. Why did you agree to do this?
That's a great question. Well, I would say a couple of things. One, I love Cal State Channel Islands, and I've loved it since I came in 2018. But we're at a very interesting time in our organizational development. And to me, the transition was challenging on a number of fronts. But I always say, leadership transitions are very challenging, even under the very best of circumstances. And here we are in the midst of COVID, racial and social unrest and some economic uncertainty. And we're even having transition at the chancellor level as well. So that made things even more complex. But thankfully, as Vice President of Student Affairs, my leadership was not necessarily confined to the parameters of student affairs. And, I've developed a strong bond with the campus community. I would say, thinking about it, it really started, Neil, with my very first semester here in fall of 2018 in my vice president role. We navigated some really significant campus crises. If you recall, we had the Borderline bar shooting in the fall of 2018. 12 people died. We had like almost 50 students at that campus at the scene. So helping lead and navigate our campus response. And if you recall, the very next day, we had the Hill Fire, which resulted in a campus evacuation. And I always say, in times of crisis, it either brings people together, faster, or things can go off the rails very quickly. And thankfully, it brought our campus community together and helped me really get connected with our faculty, staff, and students much faster than it might have taken otherwise. So to me, with the transition, while even though there were so many challenges, when the chancellor approached me with the opportunity, the first thing I thought about was at Channel Islands, the good news is that we have some sense of clarity on our institutional mission and our goals. And if you talk to any faculty or staff member here, and ask them about what we do here, it always starts with our students. And it's clear, they talk about how our students are primarily first generation college students, how, that come from historically underserved and marginalized groups, and a large proportion of Pell eligible, and that, we're all committed to not only students accessing higher education here at Channel Islands, but most importantly, ensuring their success, and not just here, but post-graduation as well. We want to ensure that they're serving in our communities, but leading as well. And to me, all of this clear mission is captured in our mission-based outcome statement. And I think that's one of the things that really drew me to the position, Neil, was we have this common purpose, and it's going to help us lead. And I think when we think about nationally right now, all the struggles we see with our nation, and I think it stems from us not having clarity as a nation on our goals and objectives. And I think many of the goals and objectives are incompatible, incongruent with each other. And thinking back, I'm a psychologist by trade, so thinking back to the social psychology literature, we used to think back in the day that the best way to bring groups together was through a common enemy of sorts. But we found that that's not sustainable, and we see that playing out every single day. But what we know now is that the best way to bring groups together is through a common goal. And to me, that's the beauty of Channel Islands, and why I was so attracted to this interim position, because that to me is the foundation for success moving forward. And we may have different ideas, obviously, on methodology or the best way to achieve our goals, but to me, that's part of the process of organizational development moving forward. So just very excited about the foundation we have in place, Neil.
That's a great answer. And it's probably the reason, or one of the reasons, why the chancellor decided to make you interim president. And I don't know if our viewers realize that typically when a president leaves, the chancellor hires a former president, retired president, to take over. And so this is rare when someone from the school is appointed. And based on that great answer, I understand fully now why they made that decision. So what are the overarching principles and values that are going to guide your presidency?
Yeah, so right now, really what I'm looking at is our organizational development. We're almost 20 years old. It's such an interesting time in our development because we're not a startup, and we're still growing and developing. So to me, one of the main priorities for me is these high level conceptual areas. And the first one is really, the first priority is how do we bridge better our founding mission pillars and values with our current strategic initiatives. To me, that's really the top priority for me right now, because we've had these founding mission pillars that we found the university on in 2002, and they've served our institution very, very well, and they still do. But over time, our institution has changed. Our student body population has changed. We're a minority serving institution, Hispanic serving institution right now. So all these changes have required that strategic plan that we have in place now. So to me, trying to find ways to highlight and bring to the forefront our founding mission pillars within the context of our strategic plan, but doing so in new and innovative and forward-thinking ways. So to me, the top priority is how can I help facilitate the natural growth and evolution of our founding mission pillars to help us move forward in the next 5 years. So that's one thing. The other thing is very common to a lot of organizations, but how can we improve organizational communication, and how can I improve direct communication at all levels of the university? And another large concept and priority is, finding some common ground on the parameters of shared governance. So those are my high level conceptual priorities, but on a very tangible level. And this was clear from the chancellor's discussions with the campus community and my experiences here in the last 2.5 years, is that we have to stay committed to our commitment to inclusive excellence. And I would say this has really already become what I would say is a cardinal trait of my presidency, because over the years, our institution has done an incredible job promoting inclusive excellence. Long before I got here, folks have been doing a lot of work, but it's gotten a lot of attention since I've been here, and of course during this last year. So one of the top priorities for my presidency in the campus community right now, we've been out doing the tour and talking about this, is we finalized our inclusive excellence action plan framework. And what we've done is we've really consolidated, looked at all of the guiding principles, recommendations, and documents that we've been using to guide our work in inclusive excellence and realizing social justice, and done some interesting analysis to develop what I like to call a more tangible, digestible, and really actionable plan for our campus community. So really, we've identified this framework that focuses on 6 areas. One, in terms of inclusive excellence, just professional development opportunities and leadership development opportunities for our faculty and staff. And this is really important, but how do we recruit and hire, but most importantly, how do we retain diverse faculty and staff and students? And also the third point is, continuing our work to realize our campus culture of inclusive excellence. The fourth priority, which I could talk all day about, is improving database decision-making, and of course, facilitating student access and success. But I think this is where we're looking to engage the community in lots of ways, but providing inward and outward facing advancement, community, and government relation efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that is really a top priority. And of course, in the interim here, COVID. We have to come out of this COVID crisis, and hopefully the light's at the end of the tunnel here soon, and we're planning to repopulate in the fall. So, how do we get through the spring semester safe and intact, but also how do we get through and really thrive on the other side when we all return to campus?
Before we get into COVID, one more issue about inclusive excellence. One of the metrics that is really critical is graduation rates. How have you done in terms of not only graduation rates in general, but among disadvantaged first generation?
Yeah, it's really been interesting because if you think back, COVID hit us spring of 2020, a year ago, almost a year ago today, right? And we had to make this shift to a fully virtual environment on all aspects of our campus community. So we were really concerned about our fall 2020 enrollment, whether or not we were going to be able to retain, because as we know, our students, faculty, and staff were hit very, very hard on numerous levels from COVID. So we were actually a little bit worried about what our retention would look like into the fall semester. And we were pleasantly surprised. We had projected a 5% decrease in enrollment. But what we saw was, while we had decreased numbers of incoming new students, our retention numbers were higher than they ever had been. In fact, our 1-year retention rate from the year before for our first year freshman cohort was up almost 7 percentage points. So we saw record high retention. So even though our incoming students were down just a little bit, which was consistent across the system, our retention efforts helped bring that enrollment back up. So that was one thing. And number two, when we looked at our graduation initiative graduation numbers, we saw gains there. We have the most work to do in our 4-year graduation rates. And what we saw was when our spring 2020 and summer 2020 graduations were finalized, we saw a 7% increase in 4-year graduation rates. So that was very, very promising. And of course, our transfer students are continuing to excel. In fact, we've met our transfer graduation benchmark for our GI 2025 initiative, 2nd year in a row. So now our transfer graduation rate is up over 80%, which we're very excited about. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about is, closing those equity gaps. So when we're looking at students from historically underrepresented groups, the graduation rate was, the equity gap was almost 10 percentage points. But with this last cohort, we got that equity gap down under 3%. We're at about 2.9%, which was a huge effort. And in fact, just recently, the chancellor's office, they released all of their equity reports for each campus community in the CSU. And they have this predictive model in terms of how much progress we're making towards our goals. And I'm proud to say that Channel Islands was one of only 7 CSUs that their predictive model predicted that we would eliminate the equity gap by 2025 for both historically underrepresented groups and Pell eligible or Pell recipients. So while that's obviously still very fluid, it's based on trends and things can change. I couldn't be happier with those results. And we have some work to do because we know COVID and these stressors that have impacted our students, they're going to continue. So we have to stay on top of our game, but I'm looking forward to continuing that work.
And I guess it was about a year ago this week that the school had to shut down because of COVID. So that must have been quite a challenge.
It was very challenging. And, I was looking back at my notes actually from last year. and our cabinet members and our cabinet meetings. And we were talking about COVID in January, and where we didn't know what was happening, we were still trying to get information, and it was hard to get. And I'll never forget when we had to make that decision to go fully virtual. We made that decision several weeks before, but things were changing so fast. I remember trying to get our international, our students study abroad, trying to get them home safely. They were in Europe, and how do we get them home? And there were all these travel restrictions. That was so challenging. So when we made the decision to go fully virtual, we had that planned out a few weeks, but things changed so quickly. We had to pivot and expedite that schedule. So that was very challenging, but our campus community responded. And like I said, I'm just so grateful for our campus community, how we responded back then, and even through the summer and into the fall, and how we transitioned our campus to a fully virtual campus community on all aspects, from the business and processes side to obviously our faculty did incredible work transforming their curriculum to virtual environments, to our student affairs team, who really worked to develop virtual co-curricular engagement opportunities for students. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that work now into the spring semester a year later.
You're one of the principals involved in the creation of the Peer Mentor Program, Ambassador Program. And I guess you didn't envision how important that would be given COVID. Imagining a student coming to school for the first time, but actually not getting to school, they really would need particularly first generation, a great deal of help that could be available on campus, but they weren't going to campus. And so peer mentorship ambassador programs have been really, I would imagine, a terrific asset in this difficult time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's amazing how they have stepped up to meet the need of their fellow students. And, I want to take a step back, because when we made, the decision to go fully virtual and our fall planning, our focus was on the safety of our campus community first and foremost. So we had only about 6% of our courses were in person, and those were primarily labs, performing arts, and things like that. We had very low occupancy in housing. So we really had to work hard to find ways to engage our students in this virtual environment. And of course, our peer mentor ambassador program played a big part in that. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, what we do is we provide peer mentors who have been successful, who are first generation and from historically underserved groups, and they've developed some level of success, and we provide them with a stipend. And what they do is they work with their fellow students on a number of fronts, providing academic support, but I think also psychosocial support and helping them with that navigational capital. And we've seen the Peer Mentor Ambassador Program in numerous areas of the campus community, and they've stepped up, and we've needed them more than ever this year doing that proactive outreach. Because I think, in higher education, we've historically and traditionally been very passive, right? We always say, all right, here's our tutoring center, here's our support programs, you come see us when you need it. But what we now know is that that's not effective. What's more effective is embedding those supports into the curriculum, into the classes. And that's, the Peer Mentor Ambassador program is an example of that, where we've embedded their support into our curriculum, into our co-curricular programming. And they've done a lot of outreach, targeted outreach. And, we're seeing the results of that. The results of our Peer Mentor Ambassador program, we're seeing significant differences in the mentees that they're working with in terms of retention and persistence. So we're going to take another deep dive of the data, but the data is very promising thus far. And I think, what I love most about the Peer Mentor Ambassador programs, we have this initial investment in one student, right? And that's how we normally have done it in our philanthropic efforts. But now that one student is interacting and mentoring 10 to 15 other students, and that impact just broadens and continues to broaden. And I think that return on investment is so valuable. So yes, our peer mentors, I love them to death. They're wonderful, and they're working so hard, and I couldn't be happier with the work that they're doing.
I don't want to admit my age, but I got my COVID shot at Cottage, and I was there twice, and both times I was helped by a CSUCI nursing student, which is a great advertisement for all that CSUCI does to all the communities, including Santa Barbara.
Well, I have to give a shout out to our nursing program. So to the nursing students and the faculty, you might have seen it. We put out an article about this, but 250 nursing students and faculty, they've been out and about in the community on the front lines, helping in Ventura County, Santa Barbara, and soon even LA County with the vaccination rollout. And to me, that's just an incredible contribution to our community. But at the same time, our students are gaining valuable experience, in the trenches, serving the community during these very tough times and getting the clinical hours that they need to graduate. So it's a true combination of all those wonderful things like experiential learning, service learning that contributes to student success and serves the community at the same time.
So I assume we're all working on how the school is going to be repopulated in the fall.
Yeah, that's the question right now. So back in January, our new Chancellor Castro, following up with then Chancellor White, had indicated that the CSU was planning to be back in person for the fall semester, and their caveat was the majority of instruction would be in person. And of course, things are changing so rapidly. You mentioned the vaccinations, and right now we're very excited because the vaccination has been rolled out, and we're also seeing the tiers. So tier 1B includes educational sectors. So, a lot of our faculty and staff are getting vaccinated. But to me, for the fall, really, while the vaccination is key, we want to plan for the highest possible ceiling. So we're working with public health and our environmental health and safety team and our facilities team to identify what that highest capacity ceiling is. And even if we are, vaccinated, what are the guidelines for social distancing? What is that going to look like? The CDC just put out guidelines yesterday for fully vaccinated individuals. So we're working to identify that highest ceiling, plan the schedule, and then, we'll need to pivot if we need to, but we'll be ready to do so. And to me, what we're trying to do also is not only bring students back, but, how can they thrive coming back? You think about COVID, our students have experienced a lot of trauma on many levels, and their lives have changed. So to me, how do we support them in all the areas that they need: academic, psychosocial, navigational capital, and emotional support, and co-curricular engagement, so that when they come back, they're able to thrive and not just get through. So the fall planning, it's very fluid. We're in the mix of it right now. I have a meeting at the Chancellor's office on Thursday to talk more about it with some updates. So, but I am very excited. I'm very optimistic that we're going to be back here in the fall.
So final question before we open it up to the audience. What are your priorities that you would ask for philanthropic support?
Yeah, well, the one thing I'm most excited about, and I've talked to members of the foundation board about this briefly, and our Vice President of Advancement, Nicole Ipac, we've talked about it. But to me, I think we want to continue with the work that you're doing. Obviously, the work that our philanthropic efforts have provided, it's been phenomenal on so many levels. And some examples of that, I know we've raised a lot for our basic needs program. Well, guess what? Timely. We've seen, I believe it's almost 130% increase compared to last year in our basic needs utilization for our emergency housing and financial assistance, our peer mentor ambassador program I mentioned, but also internships and experiential learning. All of those things are paying dividends for us. So for me, what I want to do moving forward is how can we utilize this data to better inform and evaluate our philanthropic efforts, goals, and priorities. And to me, a good example of this is looking at our scholarship data. And there's not a lot of people doing this, but we're taking a deep dive into our scholarship data and seeing, number one, from an equity lens, are our scholarship recipients representative of our student body population? And I'll be honest, right now, the answer is not necessarily. So we need to understand, is this an access issue? Is it how we review? Is it how we market our scholarships? But also questions like, okay, is it better to give more money to fewer students or less money to a greater number of students? What's the biggest return on student success? Is it better to have continuous scholarship awards available for students versus just maybe one time or once or twice throughout their college career? So these are things that I really want to take a deep dive in. We've looked at some data going back to fall 2016. And I can't wait to take a deeper dive. We've done some good analysis. So we have some preliminary findings. I'm actually going to be sharing some of those tonight at our foundation board. But to me, that's a good example of how we can take the philanthropic work that we've done and build on it and take it to another level, really, using the data that we have available.
So I'd like to open it up to questions now. And the first question actually is right on point to what you were just talking about. And it's, do you think going forward that we have the resources in place to offer the help and support that some of our students are going to need when the campus returns to on-site classes. My own teen granddaughter has struggled during the COVID-19.
Yeah, and I would say yes. I think we do have the resources. Obviously, we've had to reallocate internally those resources. Number one, for faculty development to make sure that the virtual teaching was solid. We've reallocated in student affairs to engage in those co-curricular programs like I talked about, and also virtual academic and emotional support, our counseling services, our advising services. So we have all those in place, but I think coming back, again, it's about really how can we acknowledge that students coming back, their lives have changed, and we have to adjust accordingly and make sure that we're meeting those needs. And I would say we've gotten some data, but what we've seen in student needs is obviously technology needs, and a lot of financial concerns and emotional support is really what they've needed, and on top of academic support. So I'd say when we're coming back, I want to make sure that our students are feeling connected once again to the campus community, because again, I don't want them just to come back. I want them to thrive. And, at the same time, we're going to need those academic supports, those peer mentor programs and the co-curricular support. And that's going to be interesting. And the other piece, I think for me, I always like to say, how can we embrace the challenges that we've had to face and overcome? Because to me, we know that test-taking behavior, academic aptitude is not always the best predictor of success anymore, especially for our students. But things like grit and perseverance, how do our students cope with adversity? How do they bounce back from adversity? We know that those things are better predictors of academic success. So working with our students to lean into that and really recognize how much they've overcome, that'll be a big part of it.
This is an interesting question. The webinar is called Vision of the Next Chapter. What chapter would you say we're in now?
That's a good question. So it's interesting. So if you were to ask me what chapter, when again, I'm a psychologist by trade, clinical psychologist. So I always think about development. And when I think about Channel Islands, I think about our organizational development. Like I said earlier, we're almost 20 years old now. We're still relatively new, but we're not the startup. And our institution has changed. I talked about us being a Hispanic serving institution, minority serving institution. And we have now developed, we're not a small school anymore, right? We're mid-sized, comprehensive, regional state university that serves our students on many levels, but also our community. So when I think about development, I also think about, how we grow and develop as individuals throughout the life course. So for me, I would equate our current stage of organizational development as being similar maybe to the developmental stage of young adulthood or emerging adulthood, because to me at least, the main developmental task of this time of life is really all about identity development. And if you think about your own lives for a minute, we dabble in identity development in adolescence, but during our young adulthood, we have a little bit more life experience. We have more exposure to various viewpoints, and we have some idea of what works and what doesn't work. And we use these experiences to, I like to say, refine and further develop our identity. So to me, this is where I see us as a university. I referenced it earlier. We have our founding mission pillars that informed our work for many years, but as we've grown, we've developed a new strategic plan and strategic initiatives. So to me, where we're at right now is how do we bring these founding pillars to the forefront, once again, within our existing strategic plan. So to me, it's about looking back, where have we been, where are we now, and where do we need to go? So what I view this chapter as really the process for our university moving forward. So what have we learned over the last 20 years? And what works, what doesn't work? And how are we refining and evolving our institutional values? And to me, that's what this chapter is about. How do we find ways to best promote the organic evolution of our institutional values? Because to me, that's what's going to be the foundation for our success moving forward, is that our institutional identity. While our missions are clear, those founding values and our institutional identity will have more clarity. And that's going to be the key to our success long-term.
Next question is, how has virtual learning impacted students who need to take a science lab or other hands-on courses like drama or dance? And I'd like to also add to that the Santa Rosa Island experience.
Yeah, well, it's put a lot of it on hold, right? So the Santa Rosa Island experience, we had to put on hold for a long time, very limited exceptions. But like I said, we only had about 6% of our sections, and some of those were labs and performing arts. But I would say this, how that specifically impacted students taking those lab courses. I would say right now, most of our information is really anecdotal. And we know that students have struggled, but we're working to get more systematic data. In fact, part of the transition, I was working with one of our psychology assistant professors who did some research towards the end of the fall semester and surveyed students on trying to get a better understanding of their experiences in the virtual learning environment. What was interesting was her research interest had nothing to do with COVID at first, but had to do with online and virtual learning. But she adapted her research questions to really get a good idea of how this has impacted our students. So we're actually in the process of looking at some of that data. So we have more than just anecdotal evidence. But for me, I would say anecdotally, the things that I've heard from students the most is difficulty staying engaged and motivated. It's hard, that's what we love our faculty student interaction. That's one of the best things about our campus is those small class sizes and how we navigate that mentoring piece. So that motivation engagement has been challenging. And of course, technology needs, our basic needs program, we worked really hard to ensure all students had laptops who needed one, who had hotspots when they needed it. But also to me, space needs were big. A lot of our students live with their families now, and it's very crowded. It's hard to study when you have all these people around you and everybody sharing the same Wi-Fi. So to me, the space needs were identified a lot by students, and also the co-curricular programming as well. How can I engage outside of the classroom? Those were the biggest challenges. But I would say this though, moving forward, this related to a previous question, moving forward, what we learned about our virtual co-curricular programs, and we're still taking a deeper dive, but I'm wondering if we were able to engage students virtually in co-curricular programs who may not have ever set foot at an in-person campus event, whether they're a bit too shy or maybe introverted. Were we able to engage students who normally wouldn't engage? So I want to take a look at that data to see if that's the case. And if so, moving forward, how do we ensure that we're still engaging them, maybe virtually, but also bringing them to campus to increase our reach to our students?
This next question is from Mark Patterson, and I'm glad he asked it because it's about staff. And the question is, what kind of initiatives are underway to help staff move forward through all these transitions and stresses?
That's a great question because before the transition, right? So even before my transition to interim president, as Vice President of Student Affairs, I always outlined our divisional priorities, right? Making sure they're in alignment with the campus priorities, and always highlighted 3 to 5 main priorities for the division. And what's interesting, I kind of took a different approach last year going to the fall semester. And this was based on things that I was experiencing personally, but also talking to so many of our staff members in the division. But one of the top priorities for me was self-care. And how do we ensure that we are caring for ourselves as faculty and staff here? Because, our students need us more than ever right now. And my message to our division, and it is to our campus community right now, if we're not caring for ourselves and doing those self-care things, we're not going to be able to pull it off for our students. So we actually work to develop, and I believe we just rolled out the first module, but we're piloting a self-care curriculum in the Division of Student Affairs where we put it together. And what we wanted to do is really structure it in a way that, number one, is grounded in research and best practices and theory and all of that. But number two is, look at how can folks engage at whatever level they're comfortable with. Because I talked to some of my team and they're like, Rich, I would love to engage with folks virtually every week. Some were saying, the last thing I need is another meeting, right? That's just more stress to me. So the program is developed in a way where we have, this curriculum set up through Canvas in the learning module and various modules, but we have it at one level where we're providing all of this good research and videos, multi-dimensional type of learning materials. And if that's how you want to engage, fine. So let's say this week the topic is on, mindfulness, for example. We have all these materials for you. And if that's what you want, if you want to be a passive learner and that meets your needs, then great. But then if you want more, then we're setting up some discussion boards that are moderated by relevant folks in the division with expertise so that you can engage with the materials even more through discussion board, but doing it in a way that aligns well with your schedule. But if you want even more than that, then we're going to be scheduling, weekly or every 2 weeks, virtual Zooms where you can engage, I guess, directly, but in a Zoom setting. But that provides you the opportunity to engage in that material and process with each other on a deeper level. So we're going to collect some data, this semester, see how it plays out. I always prefer to pilot things and work out the kinks. But if the response is good and the data looks promising, then hopefully we can help expand that. I have to thank, the folks working on that. This was a collaboration between my area, staff council, human resources, and of course our ombuds played a part in that as well. So really excited about that program.
So I have one final question, which brings us full circle. I asked you in the beginning why you took the job. So now I have to ask you, how do you like it so far?
Well, I do like it. I enjoy it. And I would say the campus community, I can't thank all of you enough. I mean, there's been such good support and so much outreach, and not just our campus community, but our community in general. I want to thank all of our alumni and donors and community members as well who have reached out. I do love it. And there's hard work, but it's all part of our institutional mission, our shared vision, and that's important to me. And it's interesting. I like it, Neil, and I love it, but if I start feeling too good about things, I always get a little stressed. Like, all right, I never want to feel too good about things. I want to make sure, we're motivated and continuing to strive to get better. And I think we're all on our way. And we're 2 months in, and I think we've accomplished a lot. And I'm excited for the rest of the spring semester through the summer into the fall as well.
We're at the end of our time. I'd like to thank Dr. Yao for speaking with us today and thank all of you for joining us. We value your feedback and invite you to participate in a short survey that will pop up on your screen immediately after you exit the webinar. If you're interested in attending future webinars, the link to the webinar series has been placed in the chat box. The next installment of the series is on March 30th with Provost Mitch Avila. The topic is how academic excellence can shape our future. Once again, thank you for your time. We hope you can join us again in the future. Have a great day.